What's up, guys? Hon and May 13 here with my predictions for the upcoming UFC 306 O'Malley versus DVALISHVILI. Now, I'm looking forward to this card, the first pay-per-view card I've been able to do on the channel, and let's get right into it with a great start. Chee-wee-wees! Raul Rosas Jr. versus Araquileng. Now, this fight, Raul Rosas Jr. is coming off two finishes. One of them was ground and pound, I believe. The most recent one was a rear naked choke. And since his defeat, he's come back, got two finishes. He's been looking good. He was looking good before that fight. It was maybe just a bit too much too soon. I've got in my notes here, Araquileng, he quit against Daniel Marcos, not a good sign. I think it was a kick to the nuts. I think he quit after that. I think he was just in too deep, didn't want anything to do with it. And this is probably the worst person you could be fighting because Raul Rosas Jr. is a pressure fighter, relentless, non-stop takedowns. And I think in this fight, he's going to get it done quickly once again and add to the hype. He's in front of his Mexican heritage fans at the Sphere, big card, opening up the show. And I think it's going to be a good one, a good start to the card. I think Raul's just going to continue to go forward, pressing forward, throwing shots, then shooting for takedowns. I think he could possibly catch even, Quileng, but I doubt it. I think it's going to probably just be a typical Raul Rosas Jr. takedown spamming, chin, that big chin getting in there and just rumming him to the ground and then maybe just getting ground and pound off until he turns his back, quits basically, or gets that back and rear naked choke. So it's going to be a good opener, I think, and Raul Rosas Jr. in the first round is going to take this one. Moving on to fight number 2, Edgar Chairez versus Joshua Van. Now, Joshua Van, obviously just coming off that brutal uppercut against Charles Johnson. Third round, so, it was a grueling fight. He didn't really look like he could figure out Charles Johnson. He's a crafty vet. He's good at, kind of making a fight how he wants it to be, drawing you into his type of fight. But I think this is, a decent opponent to come back to. Edgar Chairez, good fighter, and he's got good finishing ability for flyweight as well, which, you don't always see. And I think it's going to be a good fight. I think Chairez is probably going to use that 7-inch reach advantage, get Joshua Van on the end of that jab. And I think he's going to keep pushing him, trying to get him to the ground, using his wrestling. And I actually see him causing the upset here. This is my first underdog pick for the card. Even though, Joshua Van is very talented and he's definitely a lot more technical on the feet than Edgar Chairez. But I think with Chairez, being in front of his, like I said in the previous fight, being in front of those fans, they're going to be loving him. They're going to be wanting him to win. They're going to be behind him. And I think he's just going to put the pressure on. Similar to Raul Rosas Jr. in the last fight, obviously not to that level. He's not that level of fighter and he ain't got that level of pace quite, but he's good and he gets into the inside and he likes to get things roughed up. He likes to throw elbows in the clinch and he likes to get people towards the fence. A lot of his takedowns do come from against the fence. He's not like Raul Rosas where he's just running at you. He's going to get you to the area of the cage that he wants you to be in. And I think he's going to cause the upset here. And I think he's going to get this one by decision. Moving on, fight number 3, Yasmin Uregwil versus Katlin Souza. Yasmin's got the reach advantage in this fight, and she does like to use that and fight on the outside. She's actually quite technical for a women's fighter. She likes to throw kicks. She likes to keep people on the end of a jab. And Katlin Souza's just a brawler. She's very punch heavy in her offense. She doesn't really throw many kicks. She throws leg kicks, but she doesn't really throw anything too crazy. She just likes to box and, get on the inside. Rough Brazilian girl. But I think she's just going to get outpointed here. I don't think it's going to be the typical MMA fight where, there's a takedown at the end of the round and that wins it. I think this is going to be more similar to Bruna Brazil in her last fight, just using her reach and getting the rougher fighter on the end of a jab and not letting her get any offense off, not let her get too close, chill. And I think it's just going to be one of them points decision fights where she just picks her apart at range. And probably the first decision of the second decision of the card, but I think this one's going to be a lot less high pace. I think it's just going to be outpointing. Moving on, the 4th fight of the night, Manuel Torres versus Ignacio Barramonda. Now, this fight I think is going to be a good fight. I think it's a sleeper on this card. Manuel Torres has looked impressive, and Barmondes, like in one of the previous fights I said, can get a finish anywhere, and his high finish ability is what makes me think that he can get this one done. And this is actually going to be the first Mexican I'll be picking against on this card. And the simple reason is I think the finishing potential is too much to ignore. I think he's got like a 74% finish rate, and he's also very, very dangerous everywhere on the in the cage. You know, he can take it to the ground, and he goes for knee bars, he goes for chokes, Brava choke. I think he's got on his record. And I think Manuel Torres, he looked great in his last fight against Chris Duncan, who, you know, ain't the best competition, but you know that was more Chris Duncan was fighting with a really timid kind of look. He didn't look like he was going for it. He looked a bit scared almost in there and overawed. And I think Barmondes is the exact opposite of that as a fighter. And I think he's going to put the pressure on Manuel Torres. And I actually think he's going to get a third round submission. I think he's going to use his strikes early, but it's going to be more, you know, kicks, leg kicks, you know, using some hooks. And I can see him probably getting a kind of finish where it's a hook, knocks him down, flash knockdown, and then he just latches onto him in the third round for the rear naked. And I can see him just stunning him and then getting straight to the floor, pouncing. And he does have a good pounce as well. And he's going to get to him quick, get that sub, and he's going to win by rear naked choke in the third round. Similar to the two of the women in the co-main, Valentina Shevchenko, Alexa Grasso, the first fight. Similar finish to that. Moving on. Fight number 5. Norma Dumont versus Irene Aldana. Now, this is another Mexican fighter fighting, you know, in front of her crowd. But she is 36, Irene Aldana. And Norma Dumont's 31 years old. And Norma Dumont also is the stronger fighter. You know, she's got the strength advantage. And I think this is going to be a typical women's MMA card fight where she's going to get a takedown at the end of every round. You know, it's going to be loads of slapping punches, no real technique. You know, Irene Aldana is probably the better striker, but I don't think she's going to be able to handle Dumont's pressure. And I think she's going to get on the inside, you know, get her against the fence, clinch up, outman strength her, for want of a better term. And she's going to get the finish against the fence, I believe. I think it's going to be one of those where she just gets her into the third round. You know, she's took her down maybe in the first 2 and she's 2 up. And then Irene Aldana is going to get desperate. You know, the fans are going to be egging her on. And I think Norma Dumont's going to get a TKO against the fence, which you don't see too often in women's MMA. But I think Irene Aldana is 36 now. She's getting to the end of her career. And, you know, it's getting harder for her at this point. You know, she's not got the best record of recent times. She's just kind of win one, lose one. And I think this fight's going to be the one that makes her think maybe this isn't for me. Moving on. Fight number 6, and this is the first main card fight. Ronaldo Rodriguez versus Ode Osborne. Now, on paper, to quote Anthony Smith, Ode Osborne has the reach, you know, and he has the experience. But what you've got to remember is Ode Osborne is actually shit. He has no takedown ability, no grappling ability. He has no chin, no chin whatsoever as flyweight. And I just think Ronaldo Rodriguez, you know, this was made for him, wasn't it? They've put him on this card to have a showcase performance. They've given him an absolute can. And I've also got my notes here that Rodriguez, I can see him dropping him with a hook. I can see him dropping him really, really in one of those exchanges, because Ode Osborne will end up probably thinking, oh shit, I'm just getting absolutely picked apart here. My face is getting absolutely mauled by these jabs and these long kicks to the body, you know, and he's going to end up thinking, you know what, I'm just going to be a tard and I'm probably just going to come in and start swinging. And I see that being when Daniel Rodriguez gets the finish. And I think that's going to come at the end of the second round. I think the first round is just going to absolutely outclass Ode Osborne because he has no skills whatsoever. And then Osborne's going to have some kind of weird CTE moment where he's going to come in swinging, and Daniel Rodriguez is just going to catch him with a big hook and he's going to knock him out. And any other fighter at flyweight, you don't usually see straight knockouts like that. But with Ode Osborne, I believe that's going to be what's going to happen. So if you're thinking of putting money on to help you parlay, I think you should go for a finish in this fight, because the odds aren't great, but I think a finish at flyweight always gives quite good odds. Moving on. To fight number 7, one of the fights I'm actually looking forward to. I've seen a lot of people slag it off. Daniel Zellhuber versus Esteban Ribovics. Now, the reason I'm looking forward to this fight is because I really do think that Daniel Zellhuber has the ability to be a top fighter in the lightweight division. Not top 5, but possibly top 15, top 10. And he's got the reach, similar to the previous fight. He's got reach and he's got a really good way he uses that. He likes to pick at range, but he likes to also throw nasty leg kicks. And he's really, really competent on the feet. And he's really, really impressive when he's on a roll and he's, running away with fights. He looks really elite. And I think that he's going to absolutely maul Esteban Ribovics. I think in his last fight he beat another Argentinian, Zellhuber, Prado, I believe it was. And I think he's going to go on a bit of an Argentinian tour here, because I think he's going to beat another Argentinian here. And I think he's going to do it in even more impressive fashion, because usually he doesn't do all he can, Zellhuber. He likes to just do just enough to get that decision win. But he's never fought on a card as big as this, in a spot as big as this on the main card. And he's in front of those Mexican heritage fans. And I think he's going to try and impress, and he's going to get the finish in the 3rd round by just overwhelming Ribovics with just nasty shots, nasty body knees. And this is going to be against the fence probably in the 3rd round, when he thinks, you know what, I could coast to a decision, but I'm going to try and put on a statement. And I think that might be the kind of performance that can get him one of these big fights he's looked out for, like the Paddy fight. So I think he's going to have to do something impressive here, and I'm backing him to do it. Moving on to fight number 8 on the main card. Fight of the night. Apart from the 2 main events, this is the best fight on the main card. Brian Ortega versus our mate Diego Lopez. Now, I'm a big fan of Diego Lopez, but I've got to say I was disappointed in his last fight. I thought he got exposed. I thought he was so much bigger than Dan Ige. He made Dan Ige look like a bantamweight, and a small bantamweight at that, which isn't surprising because Diego Lopez is a big heavy, he's a big heavy featherweight, but he didn't have to make weight in that last fight either. So I was very disappointed he didn't find the finish and outstrength Dan Ige and get one of those, rear naked choke, one of those submission victories, or even rock him and then get him into maybe a dominant position on the ground and pound, because he had so much of a strength advantage in that fight. But he didn't, and I was let down by that, and it's made me reconsider this fight, because Brian Ortega is probably the biggest featherweight he's faced so far. And I think Ortega's going to take this one. I think he's going to shock a lot of people. I think he's going to, not really be at the level of Diego Lopez on the feet, but I think he's competent on the feet, and he's got quite unorthodox ways of throwing punches, and he likes to also mix in takedowns with them punches, which is something Diego hadn't had to face that many times in the UFC. I think he's going to get on the inside when he can. I think he's going to use a lot of his grappling finesse on the fence, getting into them positions where maybe Diego stood up and he's going to be sat on his back, wearing out Diego Lopez, which, is a big featherweight. I think it can't be too easy getting to that weight, and it might wear him out eventually. And I see Brian Ortega actually getting the finish in the 3rd round. I think it's going to come when Diego Lopez is probably coming in, going for some crazy shots, thinking that he's maybe going to get to Brian, and then I think Brian's going to get to behind him, get on his back, and I think he's going to, by the 3rd round, be so exhausted, he's going to get him to the floor, and he's going to use that jiu-jitsu mastery and get his neck and finish him with a rear naked choke in the 3rd. And I think it's going to be a big shock to a lot of people how much it makes a difference when you fight in a featherweight that's at your size and he's got no kind of advantage over with the strength, because Brian Ortega is a very strong featherweight, and I'm really expecting him to end the hype train. Moving on, fight number 9, co-main event, Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko. Now this fight, I think, is going to be the most, I don't know if I'd use dominant, but I think this is going to be the one where Alexa really puts it to bed. She's getting up in age, is Valentina Shevchenko, 36. And I don't see many people mentioning this, but Valentina Shevchenko looks like she really struggles at this weight now. I think she needs to move up to bantamweight. And I believe that in this fight, she's going to really struggle with Alexa Grasso's pressure, because I think, the older you get, the more weight cuts. It's really hard to keep a pace when you're struggling to make that weight and you're getting up in age. And I think Alexa Grasso is going to use that typical pressure style she uses, the boxing, the great combos, and I think she's going to use a lot more takedowns in this fight. I think it's going to be like the first fight, but for the full fight. I think it's going to be where she's just throwing punches and then possibly maybe hurting Valentina like she did in the first fight, but maybe in the first round this time, so it might come a bit earlier. And then Valentina Shevchenko is going to get really cautious, and then she's just going to get bullied and walked down by Alexa Grasso. And I see Alexa Grasso really, really putting it on Valentina Shevchenko. But unlike the first fight, I do think she'll survive to the end because I think she's going to be cautious this time. Because I think once she gets hit and hurt, she's going to have flashbacks to that first fight, and she's going to think, crap, I better calm down here. I can't go too far with this. I can't get too aggressive. So Alexa Grasso, decision. And I think she's going to retain a belt. Moving on to the main event, what everyone's waiting for. Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili. Now, my breakdown for this fight's simple. Merab, and no one talks about this enough, has very, very sloppy takedowns at times. Now, if he shoots that many takedowns, that eventually I just think he gets a bit lazy and can go in sometimes with his head a bit too far forward. Now, is anyone going to tell me that Sean O'Malley is not eventually going to time him with a similar knee to what he hit Chito Vera with in his last fight? Is someone telling me that that is not a very, very big possibility? Because I can see that happening all day. I think he's going to catch... I think it's going to be like the knee against Vera, except that Merab's going to be coming in full force with a takedown. And I think he's going to absolutely demolish that jaw and that big nose of his. I think he's going to put his nose into the other side of his head. I think it's going to be the highlight reel knockout that Sean needs after his decision. Because a lot of people have complimented his last performance, but I think to be the real superstar O'Malley wants to be, you need highlight reel finishes. And I think this is going to be that finish. And Merab, you know, I can see his path to victory. He might try, and he's weirdly the underdog, but I can't see how he'd win. I can see him shooting these takedowns and maybe being a bit more cautious for when he times them, you know, maybe mixing up the shots a bit more, you know, maybe throwing them closer in instead of just shooting like a tard from out at range. But we know that, you know, Merab's not the cleverest guy, and I can see him thinking he can just basically switch levels and get O'Malley, and he can do it repeatedly like he did against Peter Yan. But the difference between Yan and O'Malley is O'Malley has a lot more range of striking. You know, he has obviously the reach, so he can time them knees, and he has a lot higher percentage chance of being able to catch Merab coming in. So I can see that being a really, really highlight reel stoppage where people are going to start saying O'Malley is going to be the next star. But there is a world where Merab just basically actually uses his brain and starts to maybe be a bit more careful with when he shoots his takedowns and not just spam them for the sake of it. Because I don't think he's a great shooter. I think he does it by using his pace, similar to Henry Cejudo fight. But Henry Cejudo doesn't have a kicking game. So I don't think it's going to be kind of that fight where he can just bully him. And he's also a midget. O'Malley's probably one of the lighter fighters that he's faced, because O'Malley actually does have a lot of like head movement and he's on his feet light, so he likes to use his, you know, fluidity to throw shots that you don't see coming. Whereas Henry Cejudo, you know, he's quite ploddy and heavy. You know, he likes to come in, use his striking because he fell in love with that. You know, he thinks that he's one of the better strikers in the division, even though I think he's very overrated. But the wrestling, you know, that's the one thing that won him the fight against the Olympic wrestler. So people need to realise, I think, that O'Malley should be a significant over the odds favourite here, because he's really, really impressive. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that everyone enjoys the fight.